Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. Let's begin today's session of the comprehensive news analysis with the first article that focuses on whether or not there is a need for India to have more than one time zones in the country. Ever since 2002, this has been a topic of discussion in the parliament, although not at a very large scale. Multiple members of parliament have raised this question to the government that why is it that the government is not thinking about having multiple time zones in the country. The demand is based on the fact that especially in the northeast part of the country and in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, because of their geography, they see a much earlier sunrise and a much earlier sunset. For instance, in these places, the day can start pretty quickly, that is at 5 a.m. or 5:30 a.m. And similarly, the day would end and the sun would set at about 5:30 p.m. in the evening. Meaning that if they have the same working hours as other parts of the country, let's say in Delhi or in Gujarat, they are losing out on a lot of time. For instance, if in these parts of India, the sun already sets at 5:30 p.m., means if they are in office till let's say 6:30 or 7 p.m., that means that they would have to switch on their lights, they would have to extend their day. Rather, what they could have done is they could have started their day earlier as compared to the usual start of 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. They could easily start their day at 7:30 a.m. or 8 a.m. and end the day earlier, let's say 4 p.m. That is why we need to have different time zones depending upon the width of the country, so that the places where the sunrise and the sunset is earlier, they can start their day earlier. Now, this is a demand that has been made by multiple members of parliament from multiple political parties. However, irrespective of whichever government is in power, this demand has not been accepted. In fact, as per this article, there have been 16 times that this idea has been proposed in the parliament, that India should have at least two time zones, if not more. Just to give you an idea, Russia has a total of 11 time zones because the country has such wide landmass. India, on the other hand, has only one time zone, that is a GMT, Greenwich Mean Time, plus 5:30. The argument from the government side usually is that if we have multiple time zones, it might create a lot of confusion because the people are not used to it. Especially, it would create disruption in services such as airlines, railways, radio, television, etc. For instance, let's say you are in Guwahati right now, and in Guwahati it is 2 p.m. and then you are in Ahmedabad right now. At the same time in Ahmedabad it is 1 p.m. The problem is which time are you following for the flights, which time are you following for the railways, etc. That might create a lot of confusion because we are not used to it as a whole, as the entire country. And that is why no government has tried to implement this idea, although many experts have been in favor of this idea. As I said, the current situation leads to a lot of valuable hours being lost in the morning, electricity being consumed unnecessarily because they have to work after it is dark in their areas. This all could have been avoided if we just would have shifted the time zone by 1 or 1.5 hours. And this is not a very new practice if you look at countries across the world. I already gave you example of Russia that has 11 time zones. Even US has 5 time zones. And because it has been going on for such a long time, the people in these nations have gotten used to it and there is no confusion about it because they specify which time zone are they talking about whenever they quote any specific time. In India, on the other hand, while the experts have not favored multiple time zones, but there are some experts that favor the concept of daylight saving. Now, daylight saving means that for some months in a year, you can shift your clock and you can prepone your clock to 1 hour earlier. So again, for example, if it is 1 p.m. in Ahmedabad, people living in the northeast part of the country or people living in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands can set their watches so that the same time in their watches is being shown as 3 p.m. This is also a concept that many countries across the world follow. The difference mainly between daylight saving and having multiple time zones is that daylight saving only comes into being for only a few months in a year when the weather changes mainly and when the days become shorter. On the other hand, having a different time zone is a permanent thing altogether, that you have permanently shifted the time zone and that will remain fixed throughout the year. That is the main difference between these two. Also, there is an argument that even government experts have supported this idea. There was an article in Current Science, which is one of India's most famous scientific journals. In this article, the scientists from CSIR National Physics Laboratory in Delhi said that maintaining Indian Standard Time, that is IST, should be easier if it is divided into two separate time zones. These scientists said that the circadian rhythm of the body, that is the rhythm that is responsible for our body clock, will get used to it even if we have two different time zones. However, there is also one more point of view coming in from other people. Some people are saying that the reason why the government does not want to go ahead with a different time zone for northeast part of the country or for Andaman and Nicobar Islands is that the government does not want people living in that part of the country viewing themselves as being separate from other people living in the country. Indian government wants to pass on the message of unity for the entire country, and having two different time zones with one specifically meant for northeast part of the country and one others would not really go well in this direction. That is why, irrespective of whichever party is in power, it is very unlikely that the demand for multiple time zones in India will ever be met. This is what some people right now point out. Now, as I said earlier, the concept of daylight saving is not a very new concept. In fact, it has been in existence from the early 20th century. Daylight saving, as I said, is a practice of turning your clock ahead as a warmer weather comes in, and then you can turn the clock back once the colder weather comes in. So it is only for a few months in a year, and it's not a practice that is followed throughout the year. It is still followed right now in over 70 nations across the world, although India does not have this concept. Not just India, mainly the nations which fall somewhere near the equator don't really experience a lot of variation in the daytime between the different seasons, and that is why they don't really want to create a lot of confusion, and that is why they don't really go ahead with the daylight saving concept. It first started in 1908 in Canada, but the other nations started adopting it only in 1916 in Europe, with Germany and Austria being the first ones. Their main idea of adopting this concept was that it would reduce the use of artificial lightning so that the day would end earlier and people could go back and they would not have to use that lightning at their office places where they used to work. However, today the difference is that if you look at the life of the people around the world, we are using power and electricity in so many of our devices and not just our LED bulbs, etc., that it would not make much of a difference even if we shift our clocks 1 or 2 hours earlier or 1 or 2 hours later. That is why the modern society will not really be impacted greatly with the concept of daylight saving. Rather, it would just disrupt our body clock and it would act as a concept of jet lag, and it might not be for the benefit of the people in the long run. Now, the article also makes a mention of something called circadian rhythm. This concept came in the news mainly in 2017 when the Nobel Peace Prize in the category of physiology or medicine was awarded to people who studied the molecular mechanisms that control the circadian rhythm. Circadian rhythm mainly is a 24-hour cycle that tells our body when exactly should the body feel sleepy, when should the body wake up, when should the body eat, etc. Mainly, how do we conduct ourselves in a 24-hour cycle that is determined by our circadian rhythm? It's an internal body clock. That is why our body automatically knows that if it's 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. in the morning, we should start to get ready for work. We should start feeling energized because there is an entire day's work ahead of us. All that is because of molecular mechanisms that happen inside our body, which is called as circadian rhythm. And as we discussed, many people point towards the fact that if we change time zones abruptly, it may lead to certain disruptions in the circadian rhythm of the people as well. The next article that we have focuses on the issue of not having enough women in the higher judiciary in India. The Chief Justice of India, Justice N.V. Ramana, recently gave a long speech about the lack of women in the higher judiciary in India. And that is what this article is talking about. This article says that even though there are a few women judges right now in the Supreme Court, if you look closely at them, their tenures are usually much shorter as compared to other judges in the Supreme Court. The article says that there have been 11 women judges in the Supreme Court till now, but most of them have not even had a tenure of 5 years, while the average tenure of a Supreme Court judge is over 6 years, but for women judges, the average tenure seems to be much lower. The only women judge so far that has completed a 6-year tenure is Justice Ruma Pal, who was in the Supreme Court from Jan 2000 to Jan 2006. Recently, Justice B.V. Nagaratna was appointed as a judge in the Supreme Court, which was a landmark movement because she is expected to become India's first female Chief Justice in September 2027 if all goes well. Although her tenure as the Chief Justice of India would be very short of just over a month, but still it would be a landmark movement in the Indian higher judiciary. The representation of women in the Indian Supreme Court started with 1989 when Justice Fatima Bibi was appointed as the first female Supreme Court judge in October 1989. Then we had other landmark movements as well, such as Justice Indu Malhotra, who became the first women advocate to be directly elevated as a Supreme Court judge. Usually, the pattern has been that advocates are first appointed as High Court judges and then they climb up the ladder to become Supreme Court judges. But there have been some exceptions, and the first female exception was Justice Indu Malhotra only. Recently, in August 2021, we saw 3 female justices being appointed in the Supreme Court together for the first time, meaning that for the first time, Supreme Court now has 4 serving female judges. Although overall, having 4 female judges out of 33 is still a very, very small number, but still, at least this seems to be a good beginning. As I said recently, the Chief Justice of India gave a big speech in which he talked about the fact that appointment of women judges in India should not be just a symbolic gesture. He gave his complete support to the idea that there should be more women in the higher judiciary and in the lower judiciary as well. The other problem that comes in with having short tenures is that when you have a short tenure of office as a Supreme Court judge, that means there's a very small chance that you will get to become a part of constitutional benches that decide on important cases. An exception was Justice Bhanumati. Since she served for about 6 years, she was a part of the 9-judge bench that examined the matters of religious freedom coming out of the Sabrimala review verdict. With 4 judges in the Supreme Court out of 33 being women, Supreme Court right now has about 12% women representation. In High Court, the number is even lower with about 11.5 High Court judges being women right now. And the problem is not just restricted to judges. Even in the field of advocates, out of 17 lakh advocates in India, only 15% are women. So the problem starts from the lowest level, and we should find the solution at the lower level rather than thinking of a solution at the highest level. Now, this is the present status of all the high courts in India and the number of women judges that they have. As you can see, out of the total of 627 judges in the high courts across the country, only 66 are women judges. In fact, high courts such as Himachal Pradesh, Jammu and Kashmir, Guwahati, Jharkhand, Telangana, Odisha, and even a high court such as Rajasthan have only 1 women judge, which is extremely low as compared to the total representation that we should have had. Even in case of Allahabad High Court, we have 91 total judges, out of which only 6 are females. So their representation is less than 7%, which is deplorable. Then there are cases of those high courts that don't even have a single female judge. As of October 2021, those were Uttarakhand, Manipur, Meghalaya, Tripura and Patna, which did not have even a single female judge. So you can see that the problem of not having enough women in the higher judiciary starts at the state level itself. Now, let me share with you some other parts of the speech that was given by the Honorable Chief Justice of India. He was addressing his speech to a lot of female advocates that were sitting in the crowd. He said that the demand of having at least 50% representation of females in the benches is something that he actually supports. He said that I promise that I will do everything within my powers to take up this matter even further. He said that women on average constitute only 30% judges in the lower judiciary, and the situation of women lawyers is not very good either. He said that is why I recommended that there should be some uniform policy of reservation for girls for entry into law colleges across the country as well. Now, since this is a quote given by the Chief Justice of India himself, you can always use such a quote if you are writing an answer which concern about women reservation or the policies that the government should form for women representation across the country. The Chief Justice of India also quoted the famous US Supreme Court judge who has passed away recently, that is Judge Ruth Bader. She said that women belong in all the places where decisions are being made. It shouldn't be that women are the exception. Women rather should be the norm. Another part that he highlighted in his speech was, he said that one of the reasons why courts are not very welcoming of women is that nearly 22% courts in the country do not even have a washroom facility. And that is why we have to work from the ground up, starting from the infrastructure as well. Now, the lack of women representation in the higher judiciary is not a problem that is specific to India only. So much so that the UN, in fact, in the General Assembly, passed a resolution that 10th of March will be regarded as the International Day of Women Judges in 2021. India was amongst the nations that sponsored this particular resolution. The resolution said that this is also in line with the achievement of sustainable development goals, because SDG number 5 says that the country should make endeavor to achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls across the world. The next article is from the Hindu magazine today. It talks about the interesting initiative being taken up in Arunachal Pradesh specifically. The article says that the villagers in Arunachal Pradesh have teamed up to ensure that they must protect the hornbill nest in their locality. As you know, the great Indian hornbill is a beautiful bird that is found in the northeast part of the country and in the western Ghats of India. In case you did not know, this is the great Indian hornbill bird. As you can see, a pretty beautiful bird, especially known for its huge beak. Now, the reason why this bird was not really safe in the state of Arunachal Pradesh and in the other parts of the northeast a few years back was that it was being hunted mainly for its beak that was used in the traditional cap that was made by the people living in the villages of Arunachal Pradesh. Now, as per this particular article, there is a team of 11 nest protectors in the Hornbill Nest Adoption Program. Now, this is a community-based program where the entire community has come together to safeguard these nests. Now, what is happening in short is that the team of these 11 people is ensuring that the nest of the hornbill bird are safeguarded, that there are no hunters that are coming here or there are no wild animals that are coming, put these nests in danger. On the other hand, the other people living in the community are now pooling their finances. They are collecting money so that these 11 people can be paid a salary and these 11 people and their expenses can be paid for. So this is the entire community program. 11 people taking care of the nest and the entire community taking care of these 11 people. This is the HNAP, the Hornbill Nest Adoption Program. This operates in the forest outside the Arunachal Pradesh's Pakket Tiger Reserves, and they specifically make sure that there is no harm that is being done on the great Indian hornbill. Now, the hornbill in itself is a very significant bird. They are the indicators of the health of a forest. Means when they are seen in a forest, that means the forest health is pretty good. They are the seed dispersers and are called the farmers of the forest. In fact, globally, they are threatened by habitat loss, and many countries across the world are trying to increase their population. A similar kind of a community protection program runs in the country of Thailand also to protect these birds. The Pakket Tiger Reserves and the nearby areas are home to 4 species of these birds of the great hornbill, out of which 3 are vulnerable right now. These birds have a long range of flying, and that is why they can be seen in Pakket Tiger Reserves and in the adjoining reserve areas and in the adjoining forest reserves as well, where they go in search of food and for nest, etc. Now, the main part of preservation in this program is played by the Nishi tribe. The Nishi tribe are the people who live in these areas of nearby the Pakket Tiger Reserves, and they have taken up the responsibility of protecting the hornbill birds in their area. As I said, the hornbills have been hunted for a long time in these parts of the world, basically for its beak, which is used in the traditional headgear worn by men in the community. But now the people have switched to alternative methods, and now they use fiberglass instead of the beaks that they wanted to extract from the birds earlier. This program has completed 10 years now and has been very, very effective. It first started in the year 2012 and first took inspiration, as I said, from Thailand, where a similar program runs for the protection of the hornbills. Many other citizens and institutions have come together to support the running cost of the program. Most of these 11 people team, as you see here, actually were hunters earlier. Since they were hunters earlier, they know where to find the nest of these birds, they know their pattern of flying, and they can also understand how can they protect these birds and their nest from other wild animals. And that is why the program has been extremely successful. So much so that the program was awarded the Sanctuary Asia Award of 2014 and the India Biodiversity Award of 2016. The program, in fact, has also created community support to expand further the areas where the hornbills shall be protected beyond this area as well. Now, hornbills especially is a very important species from the examination point of view also, because there has been a question asked by the UPSC specifically on the great Indian hornbill. I'll show you what question that was. Hornbill now, as you know, are a part of bird family and are found mainly in tropical and subtropical part of Africa and Asia. India itself has 9 species of hornbills that are found here. The bird has been recognized as the official state bird in 2 states, that is Arunachal Pradesh and Kerala. Now, don't be confused with Nagaland, because Nagaland is the state that hosts the very famous Hornbill Festival, but it is the states of Arunachal and Kerala that have recognized the great hornbill as the official state birds. So don't be confused with that. The Hornbill Festival, as I said, is celebrated in Nagaland and is one of the most revered and admired birds for the Naga community as a whole. As of now, 26 of the 62 species of hornbill are globally threatened or near threatened. The Indian government, that's why, in order to protect them and give them the higher security level, have placed them in the Schedule number 1 of the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. Now, just to give you an idea, this was a question asked in 2016. The question was, in which of the following regions of India are you most likely to come across the great Indian hornbill in its natural habitat? The answer here was Western Ghats. Now, because we read about hornbill mainly with respect to the northeast part of the country, it's very easy to get confused in these kind of questions. But do remember, as I said, that Kerala also has recognized the great Indian hornbill as their state bird. That is why Western Ghats can be the answer here if you have to take a chance. The next article is from the Science and Tech column of the Hindu newspaper today. This article talks about the role played by the T cells in our body and how have they been saving our body from the COVID-19 infection specifically. The article here says that now, because we have had almost 2 years of COVID, there have been multiple studies conducted about the role of T cells and the role of antibodies in the human body. The most recent of those reports has come out from Wuhan and has been published in the journal called the Lancet Microbe. This report talks about what happens to the T cells 12 months after a person has caught the infection and what happens to the antibodies. Now, in very simple terms, if you remember, there has been a lot of discussion that even if your body develops antibodies against COVID and even if your body took some vaccine shots against COVID, there were reports that the antibodies and the immunity in your body would keep on decreasing with time. This report, however, says that at least for the first 12 months, there is no significant reduction seen in the antibodies in your body, especially in those people who are younger than 60 years. Any reduction in the antibodies would only be seen after 12 months. So for the first 12 months, you're absolutely safe. And for that, you don't even require vaccine. Even if you caught an infection and your body recovered from that, even after that, for the first 12 months, your body would have enough T memory cells so that you don't catch a serious infection later on if you are below the age of 60. The number of antibodies and T cells start reducing only after the period of 12 months has expired. Also, the number of T cells that are developing in your body do not really depend on how severe the disease was. Even if you had extremely serious case of COVID or you just had a mild infection, that is not making any difference to how many T cells or antibodies would be developed in your body as a whole. However, the problem is for those people who are older and those people who had critical disease. People having critical diseases or people in the older age group, that is 60 plus, were seen to have a decline in their antibodies with time after the vaccine shots or after the COVID-19 infection struck their body. The other good part is that these T cells or the cells that give rise to the antibodies in the body were able to give a response against new variants as well and not just the old variants. So even if your body caught the old variant of coronavirus, it would still be able to fight against the new variant on the basis of the antibodies that your body had developed earlier, irrespective of whichever new variant that we are seeing of coronavirus. As I said earlier, even in the absence of the vaccination, a person who got infected by the virus even 1 year ago would still have robust immune response. All this is a part of conclusion of the report that has come up from Wuhan and has been published at the Lancet Science Journal, which is one of the most reputed journals in the entire world. Now, what should we do after 12 months if the antibodies start to decline? The journal suggests that having booster shots after 12 months can certainly increase the number of antibodies in your body. So that should be the way forward, just like many nations across the world, including India, are now doing. Booster shots have helped in preventing infections, But even after booster shots, after some time, you will see that there will be a drop in the number of antibodies after some time. Meaning that any booster shot or any one shot of vaccine would not be enough to give you a lifelong immunity against COVID, as is the case with some other kind of diseases such as polio, etc. For this, there may be a case where you would need to keep on getting a booster shot after every 12 or 18 months, as per this particular report. Now, this entire article, including the headline, makes a lot of mention of T cells. Now, T cells mainly are another form of white blood cells and are an essential part of human body's immune system. So, there are mainly two types of lymphocytes, B cells and the T cells. The reason why they are called T cells is that they originate in the bone marrow and become mature in the thymus. That is where the letter T comes from. In the thymus, they multiply and then they start building antibodies in the human body against foreign infections. Now, there are multiple types of T cells that you might come across. For example, there are regulatory T cells, there are cytotoxic T cells, etc. Regulatory T cells are the ones that control the immune reaction in the body, while these cytotoxic T cells are the ones that are activated by various cytokines and they kill the infected cells and the cancer cells within their body, and that is why these are extremely helpful to keep a human body in the best possible physical form. Cytokines, by the way, are those chemical messengers which are secreted by the T cells to build a better immunity response by the human body. These were the articles we wanted to discuss from the Hindu newspaper today. Now, a couple of practice questions. Number one, women's representation in India's higher judiciary has remained much below par since India's independence. Discuss. Second, is it feasible to adopt the mechanism of daylight saving in India? Discuss the implications of adopting such a system. Both the questions have to be answered within 250 words each. Thank you so much for watching the video.